Hello? Hello?
The rope creaked slightly as he pulled, the smaller line dragging up the ladder he had fashioned from old fire hose and copper tubing. He moved with habit now, a rhythm etched into his body after 365 repetitions. The second floor stairwell had collapsed months ago. The elevator shaft was a hollow grave filled with ash and silence. No other way up, just the rope. Just the ritual. He hauled the ladder into place, climbed, then pulled it up behind him. The world below disappeared. Above the second floor, he had made a home, or something like it. The upper floors of the old tower block had become a fortress of one, each apartment stripped, cleaned, reassigned. One room for sleep, one for food, one for books, one for bandages and medicine he no longer trusted, and one for the thing in the cage. Tin cans, strung on nylon line, wrapped the interior like webbing. No one, nothing, could reach him without sound. Not that anything ever did. They couldn't climb. They couldn't reason. At least, he believed that. Until recently. He sat in what had once been the living room of 7B, now converted into his quarters. On the wall, a hand-sketched calendar. He took a blunt pencil from a chipped mug, scratched one more line. Day 365. A full year in the tower. 6 months before that. The end of the world. He remembered it only in pieces. Rumours mostly. Wild talk on battery-powered radios and the final crackle in news feeds. Something about men becoming wolves. Cities falling, systems collapsing. But he hadn't seen any of it. He had lived alone outside it all, in a forest shack that belonged more to the wind than to him. The first time he entered the city again, to get supplies.
Hello?
Was the last time he saw another human face. The undead were already there, wandering, shambling, slowly conquering the silence with their groans. He had searched, in the beginning, block after block, building after building, miles of broken concrete and overturned cars. Nothing. No firelight, no music, no voices, only them. Now he didn't search for people, he searched for reason, or peace. He wasn't sure which he preferred. Maybe either would be mercy. He stood and stepped out onto the crumbling balcony of the 11th floor. The rail was gone, just air between him and the pavement below. The streets were empty, but not dead. He knew better. They were out there. Always. He looked down at the city and let his voice carry into the stillness. "Who are you?" The wind answered with a soft breath through broken glass. "What are you?" Silence. "Where did you come from?" Nothing. He leaned forward, hands on the concrete ledge. "How can you be dead, but alive?" A pause. Then he laughed. Quietly, but bitter. "It's not new," he muttered. "I've seen this before." He remembered the days before all this, before the collapse, when the city was full, when he'd walk into the supermarket, and the hordes were already there. The same blank eyes, the same dragging feet, the same silent obedience to invisible signs, glowing screens and weekly routines. They were dead before they stopped breathing, he said, then added with a smirk. "I just never noticed." He stepped back and wiped his hand across his face. No difference now, just slower. There had always been two kinds of people, he thought. Those who moved because they were told to, and those who moved because they chose to. He remembered watching people shuffle through life with glazed eyes and hunched shoulders, lost in distraction, alive in body, absent in mind. He used to think they were sleepwalking, and now he knew they were already preparing for the grave. Man was not meant to rot upright. He thought he was meant to build, to burn, to create, not to drift. But when the world gave people the choice to think, most declined. It was easier to follow, easier to become part of the herd. The undead were not some virus. They were a reflection, a perfect image of the life so many had chosen willingly. He turned and walked back inside. One room over, the cage stood in the center of the stripped dining area. Inside it, unmoving, stood the corpse. Still, eyes pale, mouth slightly open, head tilted forward. It hadn't moved in days, but it was not like the others. Not exactly. He sat in the corner chair, picked up his journal, and made one final note for the day. 1 year, nothing left but memory and questions, and one corpse that won't look away. His name was David Hale. It was the name of a man who once paid taxes, nodded politely, and filled out forms he never read. The name of a man who used to keep his shoes by the door, his tools on a rack, and his rage bottled in silence. It had been over a year since anyone had spoken it, including himself. But it still belonged to him, even now, even in a world like this. He sat in the room he called the thinking room. It had no bookshelves, no light fixtures, just a window, a chair, and silence. From the 11th floor, the city stretched like a carcass picked clean. Rows of broken windows, rusted rooftops, collapsed streets. The dead didn't move today. Not yet. David rubbed the stubble on his chin and stared through the window, not at the ruins, but beyond them. "What happened?" he whispered. "Was there no more room in hell?" The question was half joke, half prayer. He didn't believe in that sort of thing. Not in demons, not in God, but he believed in cause and effect. Maybe something crashed from the sky, some ancient parasite buried in ice. Maybe it was a lab. Maybe it was a curse. But deep down, he didn't believe in any of those explanations. No, he thought, this didn't happen to man. Man did this to himself. It didn't begin with a virus. It began the day people stopped thinking for themselves. It began with routines. Get up, get dressed, smile for people you hated, sit at a desk, wait to be told what to do, click like, nod yes, pretend you're fine, pretend you agree, pretend you're someone you're not, and do it again tomorrow, and the day after that, and the year after that, until one day you forget what it means to be alive. He saw it in their eyes, even before the world fell apart. The way they looked at their phones instead of the sky, the way they judged their worth by other people's filtered snapshots, the way they put on masks, so many masks, that eventually they didn't know which one was real. The undead didn't rise from graves, David muttered. They rose from offices, from cubicles, from waiting rooms and kitchen tables. They were already here. The virus just made it easier to see. That's why he left. Long before the sirens, long before the panic, he had already left. A small home in the woods, a generator, a rifle, no neighbors, no social media, No eyes pretending to care. He remembered people saying he was detaching, that he was wasting his life. But now they were the ones moaning in the streets, lost in the fog of undeath, chasing noise and movement like insects toward light. And he was still thinking, still choosing, still himself. "If you must die," he said aloud, "at least die as who you are, not as what they made you." He stood slowly, bones stiff from the cold. The wind tapped the glass gently. He walked down the hall toward the experiment room. The undead in the cage still stood, exactly as before. But now he looked at it differently. Maybe it wasn't the monster. Maybe it was the mirror. "Gotta go for supplies," David muttered to himself, strapping on his pack. "Daylight's best." It was noon. The sky was flat and overcast. The light diffused in a pale wash over the ruined city. Day was safer. You could see. And those things, whatever they were, preferred the dark. They didn't burn in it, but they waited for it. They moved like shadows forgotten by the sun, slow, deliberate, and unrelenting. A sea of rot that didn't rush, because it didn't need to. You could outrun them, but noise brought more. And so he didn't run. He crept, sticking to the smaller lanes, old alleyways and crumbling side streets where shops once sold knockoff shoes and dusty batteries. He avoided supermarkets and mega stores, too exposed, too obvious. And the undead, like rats returning to a nest, seemed drawn to those places. Even in death, they returned to their routines. He found a half-looted chemist tucked between two skeletal apartment blocks. The roof had partially caved in, and old rainwater had soaked the back wall, but it held enough. Some antiseptic wipes, blister packs of paracetamol, half a bottle of iodine, a sealed tin of beans buried beneath shattered glass. Not a haul, but enough. He filled the bottom of his pack, tightened the straps and stepped out. The street was quiet. Nothing moved. He turned left and froze. There, standing, not 10 feet away. One of them, male or once was, tattered shirt, grey skin sloughing at the jawline, blood crusted like tar down its arm. But it didn't move. It didn't groan. It didn't lurch forward with that all too familiar hunger. It just stood and stared right at him, its eyes. David narrowed his own, instinctively tightening his grip on the small crowbar hooked to his hip. Something was wrong. The others, they were blind, soulless, like empty vessels driven by rot and hunger. But this one, its eyes held focus, not madness. Recognition. He could end it. One clean hit to the skull. He'd done it before. Easier than thought. They were soft, fragile, but something inside told him not to. It wasn't fear. It was respect. No, that wasn't the word. Familiarity. Like it knew him. Like it was trying to speak without a voice. Like it was waiting for permission to remember. He stepped backward. Slow. It didn't follow. Didn't twitch. David turned and left, heart pounding. He didn't run. He walked, quiet and precise, back through the narrow paths, up crumbling fire escapes, down the rope ladder, back to the place he called his fortress. When he reached the tower, he climbed hand over hand, then yanked the ladder up behind him. Safe. He exhaled and let his heart beat slow. Then he walked out to the balcony, and there it was, standing in the middle of the empty street below, still staring, still silent. He squinted down at it. "You'll never get up here," he shouted. No movement, no reaction. You remind me of some of the people I used to work with." He laughed. That same expression, like they had something important to say, but never found the words. He leaned over the crumbling edge, eyes narrowing. "Hell, you might be my Uncle Bob. He always stood like that. Head full of nothing but regret and coffee. Morning, Uncle Bob." He laughed again. The thing did not move, just stared. Time passed. The light shifted. The wind picked up. Now, in the cold afternoon quiet, David sat cross-legged, an old pair of binoculars braced in his hands. He focused them downward. There it was, that same undead, staring up at him. The face was clearer now, half decayed, left cheekbone exposed, but the eye, the one not clouded, burned with something deeper. David lowered the binoculars slowly, froze. Two more now stood near it, slightly behind. Their mouths hung open, heads tilted at odd angles, not staring at him, but staring where the first one did. They didn't have that same spark. Not yet. But they were watching. And the first, it hadn't blinked. David woke slowly, blinking into the pale light that crept through cracked blinds. He sat up in silence. He'd slept well, which was rare. The cold hadn't crept into his bones. The wind hadn't howled. A rare thing. He stood, stretched, and stepped out onto the balcony. There they were. The same street. The same silence. And now, more of them. At least 10, standing in the exact same place. The one, that one, still in front. The knowing one. Behind it, new figures, blank faces, tilted heads, still. "Damn it," he muttered. "Gonna have to clear them out. They're giving my position away." He turned, annoyed, and walked the corridor towards the cage room. The caged one, the one he'd caught weeks ago, had always just stood there, eyes fogged, body swaying slightly like a branch in still air. But now it was looking at him, not lunging, not moaning, just watching, not with light or spark, but with intention. David froze. "The hell you looking at?" he said flatly. No movement. He stepped closer. No reaction. No twitch. He squatted down, eye level with it. Nothing. "Hungry?" he asked, sarcastic. Still nothing. No snap of the jaw, no clawing hands. He stood, his brow furrowed. He opened the cage. It didn't move. "You gotta be kidding me," he muttered. He grabbed it by the arm, skin cold and slick, the rot sinking deep, and dragged it down the hall out to the balcony. "Do something," he growled, "or I'm pushing you off. Long way down, bonehead." No sound, no resistance, just dead eyes, staring. He let out a frustrated breath. Then he shoved it. The body dropped like a sack of wet cement. Splat. He leaned over the edge and watched the twitching limbs settle. But when he looked back up, his breath caught. 50 of them. 50 undead. Standing, staring, all facing him. No movement, no groans. Just that same lifeless attention, like statues that once had purpose, now just remnants of something almost remembered. And there, in front, still, the one with the sharpness, the awareness. David gripped the railing. His voice cracked with anger, confusion, and something ancient beneath the surface. "What do you want from me?" No answer. Just eyes. A sea of them. He stood for a long time, fists clenched. Then suddenly, Something broke in him. Not fear, not yet, but truth, rising like fire through frost. He looked down at them all, voice sharper now. "I knew people like you," he said, shaking his head. "I worked with people like you." No movement. "You didn't know what you wanted either. You just followed what everyone else was doing, day in, day out. A routine wrapped around fear and pretending." He laughed bitterly. "Hell. Maybe you did know what you wanted, but you were too scared to say it, too worried what the person next to you would think." He leaned further out, his voice stronger now, a declaration, not a whisper. "You didn't live. You copied. You mimicked. You put on smiles like masks and traded your truth for comfort. You buried yourselves long before you died." His hand tightened on the concrete edge. "Well, guess what?" he growled. "I'm not afraid. I'm different." He took a deep breath. "I know who I am. I know what I am." He stared down into the horde. Their silence was no longer quiet. It was crushing. "And I ain't you." His voice echoed off the buildings like a thunderclap through ash. The horde didn't move, but the aware one, tilted its head slightly, as if acknowledging.
Did you know there is a tale hidden in the shadows? You found the trail, but the full truth lies deeper. Check the description, if you dare.
He counted them in clusters, tens, dozens, now hundreds. They filled the street below like spilled ink, a slow sea of flesh and silence. Bodies pressed together, heads tilted up, all facing him. David stood at the edge of the balcony, both hands gripping the crumbling concrete. They couldn't reach him, but he couldn't leave. They wrapped the entire block, behind, below, around, in every alley, on every sidewalk, between every crushed car and fractured wall. Still as stone, waiting, and there, always in front, that one. The first, the watcher, its eyes still locked on him. "If only I had my rifle," David muttered. "One right between your eyes." But the heat in his voice was already gone. He stepped back slowly and collapsed onto a stool inside, his breath caught, not in panic, but in the heavy, hollow stillness that settles when a man sees the truth for what it is. "I'm going to die up here," he said softly. "That's the truth, isn't it?" He rubbed his face with both hands, dragged them down, exhaling long. "There's no way out, no way down, no one coming." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice low, steady, not breaking, but digging deep. "What's a man supposed to think when death's got him cornered? When there's nowhere left to go? When you've got a date with the Reaper and no calendar to mark it?" He looked at the cracked wall in front of him, then beyond it. "I always thought I'd have some sort of revelation," he muttered. "Like the movies, some moment of truth, but I don't feel anything. Just stillness." He went quiet, and then, like a man picking up pieces of himself, he began to speak again. "I lived alone, built half my own house, never took from anyone without giving something back. I wasn't perfect. I was a little shit when I was a kid, but I made up for that." A pause. "I never followed the herd, never spoke their language. Didn't care what brand of shirt I wore or how many people liked my smile. Hell, I helped a few people climb higher than me. I'm proud of that. He stood again, walked back to the edge. I could have been one of you, he said to the crowd, and in that moment he wasn't speaking to rotting corpses. He was speaking to the lie. The one who lies to fit in. The one who cheats because it's easier. The one who pretends to be something he's not just to be accepted. I saw plenty of you in my life. He leaned further. You took off the backs of others. You climbed by stepping on someone else's work. You never put a drop of sweat into anything real. Just stole and smiled. You were leeches in suits. He slammed his fist down on the ledge. That's not me. His voice echoed through the cold canyon of buildings. You hear me out there? That's not me. Silence. He stared down at them. Still they stood, watching, waiting. I could jump, he said quietly. Quick end. No pain. A beat. Or he looked out across the world. The sky was pale, empty. I could walk out to you. See what happens. Let fate decide. Flip the coin. Then his voice changed. Lower, clearer, sharper. But what kind of man flips a coin to decide who he is? I've lived a full year surrounded by death, and I didn't fold. I won't surrender to fear now, not when I'm finally face to face with it. He took a breath. The air was cold. People think dying is the hardest part. It's not. Living true is. Standing up day after day when the world tells you to sit down and shut up. He stared at the watcher, that undead thing that shouldn't be different, but was. You want me to give in? To leap? To bow? Then you chose the wrong man. He turned from the balcony. No rifle, no plan, no allies. But his back was straight. His voice was calm, and his will was whole. I know who I am. I know what I am. And I won't give that up. Not even to death. David tied the rope ladder to the post. Tight. Final. Then he let it drop over the side. It unfurled with a snap, slapping against the concrete wall of the tower as it stretched to the ground. He stood at the edge, looking down at the sea below. Undead. Hundreds. Maybe more. All standing. All staring. And yet, none moving. Most folk would be changing their shorts right about now, he muttered. But I feel nothing. No fear. No panic. Just the kind of hollow calm that comes when a man accepts he's no longer playing the game. He's ending it. He gripped the ladder and climbed. Downward, step by slow step. Toward death. Toward truth. His boots touched the broken ground with a soft crunch. Still they stood, a wall of bodies unmoving. And then they parted, like a living sea of death. They shifted, stepping aside in slow, synchronized movement. A path opened, narrow, winding through the tide. A tunnel of bone and breathless rot. David stared forward. What the hell? He muttered. What have I got left anyway? He walked. Each step echoed against the silence, like a war drum beneath the skin. He kept his hands low, jaw tight, eyes forward. The undead flanked him on both sides, inches away, their heads turning as he passed, but never reaching, never moving. Any moment, they could collapse on him, tear him apart, but they didn't. Though I walk through the shadow of death, he said, voice low, cracking, I shall fear no evil. He paused, looked to the end of the path, to the one who stood at the center. Uncle Bob, still waiting. David spoke louder now, to the crowd, to the sky, to himself. Well, you wanted me to rot up there, didn't you? To starve, to cower, to break. Guess what, Uncle Bob? I didn't. He kept walking. I may be from the old times, but I'm a man, and I know what that means. It means facing things head on, even when you're beaten, even when it's over. To fall and stand up again, even when there's no one left to see it. The horde swayed lightly in the wind. I could have ended you, Bob, had the chance. But now, I'm walking toward you, through a sea of corpses, and you know what I feel. Pride. Because I didn't quit. I didn't give in, and I never became you. He reached the end of the tunnel, and there he stood, Uncle Bob, or whatever it was that used to be him, silent. Still, David stopped just a step away, chest rising slowly. I'm here, Uncle Bob. So, what do you want? No answer. Gonna take what's left of me? You want the last man? Go ahead. Hell, I might be the last man alive. But I'll never be one of you. You know that, right? He leaned forward, and I'm ready to take as many of you with me as I can. Then something changed. Uncle Bob's eyes, dull, rotted, lifeless, seemed to sharpen, like they focused, not in a human way, but in a knowing, like something behind them woke up. David froze. He couldn't hear anything, but something was speaking. No, communicating. It wasn't in words. It was in understanding, in connection, in some dark current of thought that didn't need language. David's vision blurred, not from fear, but from something pulling. His body still stood in front of the undead, but his mind, his awareness, slipped. Suddenly, he was in a dark room, a space without walls, ancient, endless, silent. Shadows moved like memory across unseen surfaces. There was no temperature, no time, only weight, and there in the center, something else. Not a god, not a demon, but something that had always been there, watching, waiting, listening. Something old and vast and beyond right or wrong. It had no face, no name, only presence. And it had found David. David stood in the dark. The ancient room was silent, boundless. There were no corners, no floor, just presence. The thing, the being, the force that existed outside of time, outside of meaning, hovered there, not in form, but in knowing. David stared into it, and then he shouted, "I'll never be you. I don't care what you are, or how old, or what trick you've pulled. I'll never be one of those things out there." He stepped forward, fists clenched. "I'll fight it. I'll break everything. I'll crawl across glass if I have to, but I won't become that. You can keep your silence, your visions, your riddles. I am a man, and I remember what that means." He screamed the last word into the void. "I'm a man." Then a voice, not from the thing, not from around him, but within him. It was older than sound, older than fear. It rolled through his bones like gravity. "You are brave, David. You have proved yourself again and again. Your resolve, your defiance, your belief in yourself, not just now, but in the quiet corners of your life. When no one watched, when no one clapped, you stood tall. You did not become them. I am proud of you." David blinked. His shoulders relaxed. His anger faded, not from defeat, but from peace. And then he was elsewhere. The sun kissed his face. He looked down. Old boots, grass beneath them, his house. The front porch creaked. His dog barked, bounding toward him, tail wagging like a metronome of joy. He laughed, actually laughed. His mother stood in the kitchen window, waving through white curtains. Further down the hill, two people kissed under an old tree, young and brave. The air smelled of earth, of firewood, of freedom. Faces appeared, people he'd helped. A man he once gave a meal, a woman whose roof he fixed, a kid he drove to safety. They all smiled, not with mouths, with souls. "This," David whispered, "this is real. This is peace." He closed his eyes, felt the warmth of the sun on his skin, felt whole, felt human, and he smiled. But somewhere else, in a world choked by silence, on a cracked street, layered with ash and rot, one figure stood motionless among a sea of the undead. Pale skin, blank stare, mouth open, silent, still, but its spine was too straight, its stance too calm, too centered. Around it, hundreds, thousands, all standing, but that one, it waited differently. It had once been David Hale, now it was something else. His mind, his memories, his consciousness had been lifted, suspended in an illusion, a beautiful dream, a perfect lie, and he would stay there forever, while his body, intact, powerful and proven, now stood under the will of something ancient, something unseen, unheard, and unquestioned, not out of cruelty, out of need. It had watched David's resolve, it had weighed his soul, and it had chosen him not to destroy him, but to use him for something greater, something darker, something that would one day sweep across the waking world again. Above, the tower stood empty. Below they waited, and one stood taller. End. The cruelest mercy is not to break a man, but to let him believe he won.